Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, Headliner Nation, what is going on? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners. And as always, I'm bringing you all of our matchups for the wide receiver position here in week 6 of the NFL season. Hopefully your teams are off to a great start. But with bye weeks officially here and 4 teams missing the slate this week, it is more important now than ever that we do our homework and get ready to set those lineups. Now, we go over our accuracy ratings every single week. And it's no secret that your boy got off to a rough start with Thursday Night Football in the Seahawks and Rams game. But we turned it around, Headliner Nation, for the week last week. 70% overall for our hits last week. Oh my gosh. And if you throw out the Thursday night game, your boy was just about 75% correct in his calls last week. So it would be our highest wide receiver percentage of the year. The position has been brutal so far in terms of consistency, especially from some of our superstars. But hey, feeling good. Yes, I missed on that Thursday night game, but knowing that the rest of the week was almost 75%, listen, we did something right last week, and that is what matters, ladies and gentlemen. And we're going to be doing the same thing this week, shooting for over 70%. But before we get into the video, don't forget we've got this sweet October giveaway. That's right, to be a part of the giveaway, all you got to do is download the PrizePicks app or head over to prizepicks.com, create a new account and use code word headliners when doing it. Deposit at least $20, and then you're going to be entered in the chance for the sweet package that you see here on the screen. That's right, we're going to be giving it away at the end of the month, so don't forget to get entered as soon as possible. And speaking of doing things as soon as possible, we got to hop into it. It's time to talk about our matchups for week 6 of the NFL season. Getting us started on Thursday Night Football is going to be Tampa Bay and Philadelphia. The reigning Super Bowl champions are going to head to Philly, coming off a huge explosive matchup for the wide receivers in Tampa. We're going to be starting all 3 of them again this week: Godwin, Evans, and Brown. All 3 of them are top 20 wide receivers right now. Evans, Godwin, and Brown in that order. Obviously with Brown a little bit higher on points per game because he did miss the week before. But we still need to be worried, right? I mean, this is still a group that we have to be careful of because of some of the inconsistencies that can come with having so many guys hurt. Now, the one thing that will be working for them this week is just a little bit ago, Gronk was basically ruled out for Thursday Night Football, saying that he would probably not be back this week. So it still leaves a lot of targets open for all 3 of these guys. Philadelphia does allow the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, but that's not scaring me off this high-powered offense this week. For the Philadelphia Eagles, Devonta Smith is going to be the only start for me this week at the position. Tampa Bay defense is still banged up, so he could still find a pretty decent week this week for Smith. I'm not going to expect a huge high ceiling. Tampa Bay D is allowing just under 40 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers the last 4 weeks. So they've been a little bit better recently than they were to begin the season. But Smith really hasn't had a whole lot of upside this year. And the wide receiver position in Philly outside of Smith just doesn't look great right now. Miami at Jacksonville. And I would love for one of these videos to start off with me saying, farewell, Urban Meyer. But unfortunately, it hasn't happened yet. For Miami, we're going to start Parker and Jalen Waddle, but we got to keep an eye on Parker. Now, the hamstring was the issue last week, but he was kind of a game time decision last week. Wasn't ruled out early in the week. So I'm hoping that means that he was pretty close to going and just couldn't get it. So because of that, I'm hoping he does end up making it back this week. Parker does have a safer floor for me right now than what Jalen Waddle does, but Jalen Waddle does have a higher ceiling, but it's going to kind of depend on who starts at quarterback. Now, I still believe it's going to be Jacoby Brissett. A lot of you commented on my video for the waiver wire saying, hey, Tua's expected back. Tua's not expected back this week. Tua just got cleared to start throwing on Monday. Does not mean that he will be back, but we will continue to monitor it. Do not assume that he is back this week. And for the Jaguars, Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault are both going to go back to being starts for me. Now, here's the issue with this offense. Urban Meyer is not a very good game planner or adjustment maker at the NFL level yet. Not saying he couldn't become so, but last week playing Tennessee, a team that allows the most receiving yards per game to opposing wide receivers, and Marvin Jones Jr. and Laviska Shenault combined for like 7 targets, while Jamal Agnew and Tavon Austin got 13. That's a poor coaching staff right there. That is being ill-prepared and being unable to make adjustments in the game plan, even when your wide receivers are locked down. You got to find ways to get your wide receivers open. Now, Miami has given up the most fantasy points per game over the last 2 weeks to opposing wide receivers. Over 50 fantasy points per game the last 2 weeks. So, is there risk here with these two? Absolutely. But hopefully, after another disaster last week, they switch the game plan up a little bit more and they get these two guys going. A little interdivision rivalry here with Chicago and Green Bay matching up this week. And for the Green Bay Packers, Davante Adams, Randall Cobb, both going to be starts for me this week. Allen Lazard being a sit. I'm not going to expect 16 targets, 11 receptions, over 200 yards for Davante Adams again, but we're always going to lock him in for solid games, right? Now, for Randall Cobb, here's the thing. Going up against Chicago, their slot cornerback, Duke Shelley, has allowed 19 receptions on 25 targets this season. Now, the ceiling for Randall Cobb this week, not very high, but I do think he could easily hit that 10-point floor if he were to score a touchdown. And we know that Shelley is giving up a decent amount of receptions in the slot. So hopefully we find Cobb a few extra times this week. And for the Chicago Bears, Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, they're both going to be starts. It's going to happen this week with Allen Robinson. I am feeling Allen Robinson week incoming. Green Bay allows the 8th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. And over the last 2 weeks, okay, they've allowed more because they're dealing with some injuries, right? Cornerback 1, Jair Alexander. He's on IR now, missing some time. We saw against Green Bay, okay? Cincinnati was able to stretch the field. Jamar Chase had a big catch there. He had multiple big catches, really. They were able to pick at that secondary quite a bit. Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, hoping for the same thing. And one of the things about Green Bay, too, is they had a lot of miscommunications, it seemed like, in the backfield. They just weren't matching up appropriately, or guys were getting past individuals and they weren't being covered. So because of that, Darnell Mooney, Allen Robinson are both going to be starts for me. And for Allen Robinson, he's going to be my Prize Picks prop to watch through Prize Picks this week. And I'm going to take the over on his receiving yards at 50.5. So let's go ahead and lock it in. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I am feeling Allen Robinson this week. Cincinnati at Detroit, and the Lions better watch their hind ends this week because I think Cincinnati is going to be coming in with a bone to pick. Almost beat Green Bay last week. Would have been one of those signature wins that an organization gets when they're on the up and up and they're on the way back. They just couldn't quite pull it off, though. Those missed field goals obviously killing both sides at the very end of the game. But I expect Cincinnati they're hungry this week. They're going to want to come out and they are going to want to smash. And Detroit's going to be in their way. And I don't know if Detroit's going to be able to stop them unless Dan Campbell gets out there and starts gnawing on Jamar Chase's kneecaps, okay? Unless that happens, I don't see it happening. Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, all three of these guys are going to be starts. Cincinnati is going to want to make a statement after last weekend. I am feeling that. And for the Detroit Lions, there are lots of injuries to the wide receiver position in Detroit right now. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, 16 targets, leads the team by a wide margin the last 2 weeks. He's slowly becoming that guy. And for me, He's going to be the guy that I want to start this week. Khalif Raymond, he could potentially be a start, but I think he's going to have to find the end zone to do that. And I just don't know if I really trust that. Being on the outside there worries me a little bit. I think if we can shove Amon-Ra St. Brown into the slot, which is where he's been playing, I think there is where he becomes a really nice fit target-wise for Jared Goff and ends up hitting those 10 fantasy points that we need in half PPR. Houston at Indianapolis, and kind of the same thing for Indianapolis that we just talked about with Cincinnati. Whew. Blowing that huge lead on the road at Baltimore. Indy's going to want to come out and put it to Houston a little bit this week. Brandon Cooks is going to be a start for me for Houston, though. Indy could not stop Marquise Brown last week. There was nothing that they could do. Let's see if Brandon Cooks in kind of that deep route and deep threat role is able to kind of follow suit and follow up what Marquise Brown was able to do, slicing up that Indy defense last week. Indy is allowing the 8th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers this week. Not trusting the other two guys, but we'll trust Brandon Cooks based on the volume he's gotten for a majority of the season so far this year. Now, for the Indianapolis Colts, all right, we're going to go back to Michael Pittman, okay? Michael Pittman, great week last week. Definitely loved what he was doing there. Paris Campbell's really, really close. But it's one of those things where, are we really going to see these guys get enough volume? I mean, Jonathan Taylor, Nyheim Hines, Marlon Mack, are they going to focus on running the ball, getting the ball to their running backs? That's going to be part of the question that really is going to have to be answered this week for me. Michael Pittman, though, continues to see a lot of targets. And I talked about it a couple of weeks ago, right? When talking about Pittman, we're just waiting on some of those explosive plays, those touchdowns, those things to happen. Guess what? It finally happened, and we saw what kind of output he could have. The Rams are going to head out to the Meadowlands to face the New York Giants, and Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods are both going to be starts for me this week. Now, Woods could be in for a slow week if he is outside a majority of the time. Now, here's the thing. Woods right now is basically splitting his snaps. He has almost as many snaps in the slot as he does on the outside. And the reason being is because when this team runs four wide receiver sets, they're putting Van Jefferson, Deshaun Jackson on the outside, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, they're coming into the slots, and that's how they're distributing the targets. Now, Bradbury and Adoree Jackson, okay? Both of them have been very, very good this year. Adoree Jackson, right now, based on Pro Football Focus, is not the, but is a very, very highly rated cornerback. Bradbury has actually been the one that's a little bit less than him. He's allowed 4 touchdowns this season. So for me, for Woods, Cooper Kupp in the slot, I think he's going to be fine. I think for Robert Woods, if he can get on Bradbury a little bit more than Adoree Jackson, I think that would be great. But I think a lot of that upside from Robert Woods this week that we saw last week would have to come if they're running 4 wide receiver sets and they're making Jackson and Bradbury focus on Jefferson and Deshaun Jackson on the outside. And that's why we got them listed as sits. And for the New York Giants, heading over to them right now, Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, all of them injured, out, doubtful. That's the designation I'm putting on them. I know for certain right now, it sounds like Kenny Golladay is not making his return. I don't know about Shepard or Slayton yet. We're going to have to wait on them. So for Kadarius Toney, we will list him as a start right now. He may be the only person healthy at wide receiver come Sunday. So even though with Kadarius Toney, I am telling everyone to just be careful. I didn't want you in the waiver wire video. I didn't want you to go out and spend a ton of your fab on a guy that when Slayton and Shepard come back and Kenny Galladay's feeling better, now all of a sudden Toney kind of takes that back seat again. I didn't want you guys to go out and spend a bunch of money to have the rest of the season be like, where's this upside at? That's why I was cautioning everybody. But this week, knowing that they're, it's a tough LA Rams offense, Kadarius Toney, let's get him moved around. Let's get him doing some things. Even though if the ceiling isn't as high as we saw last week, if he's the only guy healthy, he's going to get a decent amount of targets. KC in Washington. Tyreek Hill for KC is going to be a start for me this week. Washington allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, but who is the wide receiver to? That's kind of the question. But is Kansas City going to be down big to Washington this week? I don't think so. And because of that, Mecole Hardman is not going to see the 12 targets that he saw last week. Josh Gordon, I expect him to get worked back into the rotation a little bit more. Only one target last week, but one catch, one reception, 11 yards. But I don't think Hardman, I would love to start Hardman against Washington. I would, but I don't see Kansas City being down like they were last week, needing to throw so much like they did against Buffalo. Maybe we see a little bit more Darrell Williams this week. Maybe we get Jerick McKinnon into the game plan a little bit. Maybe they do work Josh Gordon in a little bit more. Just because I don't know who the wide receiver 2 is why I can't start Mecole Hardman this week. I will tell you, his floor for me is right around 3 to 5 fantasy points. But, if they do decide to come out and throw big and Mecole Hardman is the wide receiver too, I could see a ceiling of about 15 points as well if he were to score. So it really depends on what kind of volume we see, and I just don't see a ton of volume going up against Washington. And for the football team, Terry McLaurin, 11 targets last week, even with a poor performance, so he still continues to be the most targeted guy in this offense. KC, obviously, they've had trouble stopping the pass so far this season. That defense just hasn't been what we saw last year. But Curtis Samuel, got him listed as injured out, doubtful. He's kind of week to week with a growing right now. So Terry McLaurin will be the only guy that I start at the wide receiver position this week. Minnesota, Carolina. For Minnesota, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. Now, maybe not. Adam Thielen isn't the upside play that we saw last year, right? He's kind of a low-end wide receiver 2 right now, maybe a little bit higher in PPR leagues. But like we talked about this offseason, Adam Thielen was really propped up by a lot of touchdowns last season. He's just not seeing those this year, but still a good start. Still getting more than enough receptions at this point. You just can't rely on some of the upside. And for Jefferson and Thielen this week, maybe the upside just isn't what we would hope for. Carolina has been pretty tough on defense this year. They are allowing the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receiver, but we know Justin Jefferson can go ham anywhere at any time against anybody. Still going to be a start, and Thielen still going to be a start. Maybe the upside just isn't there that we would like. And for the Carolina Panthers, DJ Moore, I'm not going to sit Moore by any means because he has been so good this year, okay? I'm not going to go that route. We're not making that mistake again this week. But I think we need to start Robbie Anderson again this week because Patrick Peterson is only allowing a 64 completion percentage this year on targets his way, and he is probably going to be the guy on DJ Moore. Now, if he spends a lot of time on DJ Moore, that limits DJ Moore's upside, and that in turn will probably need to force the ball over to Robbie Anderson a little bit more. Now, Robbie Anderson, another 7 targets last week. So he's got 14, 16 targets over the last 2 weeks. They're just not connecting, okay? So are the targets still there? Yes. If you're in desperation mode this week and you need somebody, Robbie Anderson, I think you could probably end up finding guys that have far less ceiling than what he does. But again, if he doesn't have Patrick Peterson on him, Robbie Anderson, if they've got to push the ball his way, maybe he finally does something this week. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, both of them are in the start column this week as the Chargers head into Baltimore. So obviously, we're playing them. Mike Williams, as we've talked about several times over the last couple of weeks, right now his ceiling is higher than Keenan Allen's. Keenan Allen's floor is a little bit higher than Mike Williams. So Keenan Allen, you're kind of getting in here. Mike Williams, you're kind of getting in here. And because of that, it can make owning these guys frustrating at times. But again, Mike Williams is doing so many different things this year that he didn't do last year, or hasn't really done in his entire career, that is making him highly successful. So Mike Williams, the wide receiver 1 right now in half PPR formats, is the guy. We're not sitting him. We're not sitting Keenan Allen. Both of these guys are definitely in your lineups. And for the Baltimore Ravens, all right. Well, Marquise Brown, yes, you're going to be a start, Marquise Brown, of course, because why? Look at that performance you're coming off of. My God. Jake actually sent me a tweet, or not a tweet, but sent me a message on Twitter the other day, and he was like, you were just a year too late, because I did a video last year on Marquise Brown called Path to Wide Receiver 1, and talked about what would have to happen with Marquise Brown for him to be a wide receiver 1. And I talked about, honestly, he wasn't that far off of being a top 12 wide receiver. This is what would have to happen. I was a year too late because he's well on his way to doing that this year. Now, Sammy Watkins did end up coming off the field, hurt himself last week. Not sure what's going on with him. Rashad Bateman, not sure if he's going to end up being back this week. Devin Duvernay, obviously we're not starting him. So for these guys outside of Marquise Brown, I mean, come on. It's Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews right now on this team. But Lamar Jackson, put some respect on the name right now. For those of you that have said, hey, he's a running back playing the quarterback position, this dude is one of the best passers in the league right now. We got to respect the fact that he is playing like a true quarterback these days. Arizona has to head into the dog pound to face Cleveland, and this is going to be a fun matchup to watch. Cleveland, though, they just got destroyed by the Chargers. That defense did not look good. A couple of injuries there on the defense that may be affecting some of those things. But with no Max Williams this week, obviously with the injury to him, there might be some extra targets. Now, anything after DeAndre Hopkins is kind of a coin flip right now. And because of that, for me this week, I'm going AJ Green and Christian Kirk as my starts, and I'm going to sit Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore, again, a lot of ceiling. We're seeing it where he's making some really big, nice plays, but it's really hard to gauge on a weekly basis who is going to be the best two wide receivers behind DeAndre Hopkins in this offense. Now, again, Cleveland has had a pretty good defense all season. This past week, though, got destroyed by the Chargers. We'll see if that ends up carrying over, though, and if the Cardinals and Kyler Murray can keep it going. Now for the Browns, we're going to start Donovan Peoples-Jones this week. Now we're going to sit Rashard Higgins, sit Odell Beckham Jr., Robert Alford, who plays on the outside right now and will probably be matched up against OBJ, is only allowing a 62% completion percentage his way this season. What's even tougher than that? Well, that would be the guy that's probably going to be facing Rashard Higgins in the slot this week, who only allows a 52% completion percentage. So give me Donovan Peoples-Jones on the outside, probably getting that corner back to coverage from Marco Wilson, who has been kind of the weak link in that secondary this season. After John Gruden stepped away from Las Vegas, it's going to be interesting to see how this team responds this week. For the Raiders, I'm going to start Henry Ruggs and Hunter Renfrow. Now, Denver is allowing the second fewest fantasy points per game to opposing running backs right now. I am expecting a potential tough day. Now, Jake has Josh Jacobs listed as a start, okay? I'm expecting a little bit of a tougher day. Now, one of the reasons Jake might have Jacobs listed as a start is because he sniffs the end zone anytime they get close, right? You score a touchdown as a running back, you're on the way to a pretty decent day. So because of that, me personally, I just think that they're not going to be able to run the ball as much this week as they would like to, and they're going to end up throwing it a little bit more. Now, Henry Ruggs is going to be the guy with the higher upside. Hunter Renfrow is going to be the guy with the lower ceiling. Now, one thing to keep in mind for Denver, even though the defense has had some good games, some bad games, they have allowed the fifth most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers the last 2 weeks. And that's why I'm going to go with Henry Ruggs and Hunter Renfrow. And for the Denver Broncos, Cortland Sutton, the Las Vegas defense, this is what they have looked like the last few weeks. So over the last 2 weeks, they've allowed the second fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. Over the last 4 weeks, they've allowed the fifth fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. Over the last 5 weeks, the total of the season, they've allowed the sixth fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. The defense is getting better each and every week. And again, what is it going to look like? How are they going to respond this week with John Gruden being gone? Cortland Sutton being the wide receiver one in that offense. We're going to go with him. Potentially Tim Patrick if you want. I just don't see the upside in the route to 10 points this week. Dallas at New England, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper. They've lost some of the upside that we expected this season. And why is that? Well, it's because Zeke and Pollard are crushing it on the ground right now, and because Dalton Schultz has emerged as such a fantastic weapon for Dak Prescott. So those two things combined have limited the ceiling for Lamb and Cooper, but they're both still pretty reliable wide receiver twos because they are still throwing the ball quite a bit, and because the run game has been so effective, it's opened up the passing game a little bit for this team, which is great. On the flip side, for the New England Patriots Patriots at home this week. Jacoby Myers is going to be a start for me, but that is going to be all. He is tied for 9th most targets at the wide receiver position in the NFL right now. The ceiling is not there because he is allergic to the end zone. He gets near. He's like, no, So because of that, his ceiling is low every single week, but he's got a very high floor because of how many targets he gets. I do anticipate seeing a tight end game here, though, this week. Seattle at Pittsburgh, and no, DK Metcalf is not a sit this week. He is a start. Who would ever sit DK Metcalf? Insert crickets chirping, Taylor. Anyway, this is not the Pittsburgh defense of old. They are allowing the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. So, I mean, the matchup is clearly better this week. I will say, however, though, even though I missed on DK Metcalf last week, I hit my Prize Picks prop of under 5.5 catches. So, high five, Headliner Nation. Just a little bit of positive out of a negative take out of that game. Tyler Lockett, we're going to be putting him as a start again against this Pittsburgh defense. Is not your typical Pittsburgh defense. They're not really helping to stop very many people this season. And on the flip side, though, no Juju Smith-Schuster for probably the rest of the season now at this point. Deontay Johnson, Chase Pool. What? Anyway, Chase Claypool. These two have a ton of upside now. No Juju, more targets for them. Again, the defense isn't that great. They're going to be throwing it a whole lot. And yes, Geno Smith is going to be playing quarterback, and that may end up hurting him a little bit. But again, the defense, not that great. We're still going to roll with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. James Washington is kind of the X factor here. Will he be back this week? Does he play in the slot? What are they going to be doing? But the Seattle defense, we talk about Pittsburgh's defense not being that good. Seattle's defense is not that good either this season because they're allowing the 6th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. That's just not the shutdown team that it used to be out there in the greater Northwest. Buffalo and Tennessee is going to bring my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Don't forget, we are sponsored by our friends over at Manscaped again this season. If you go to manscaped.com and use code word headliners when you check out, you're going to get 20% off your entire purchase, and you're going to get free shipping on all of your items. So make sure you go get all of your good goodies from Manscaped this week and use that code word for 20% off. Buffalo is going to head into Tennessee, who is absolutely getting throttled in the secondary this season. They still allow the most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, and they allow the most receiving yards to wide receivers this season. And that is why Urban Myers is such a because he couldn't figure out how to beat this defense last week. Come on. So for me, Cole Beasley is going to be Sanders and Stephon Diggs are going to be the starts. They are the guys at the wide receiver position. I warned you a couple of weeks ago about Cole Beasley, though. I thought maybe his matchup this past week would have been a lot better because the slot corner for KC they don't do that well. But I've been telling you for a couple of weeks, Dawson Knox is taking the targets that used to go to Cole Beasley. Knox is now the guy for Josh Allen. I am off Cole Beasley for the time being until I see him start to get those targets again. But with the way Knox is playing, I don't know if you need to worry about Cole Beasley anymore. And for the wide receiver position on Tennessee, Julio Jones, I don't know his status at this point. As of this recording, I don't know. If he does end up playing this week, he is going to be a start for me, but he is going to be a low ceiling in what will be a tough matchup. Coming off a hamstring injury, I'm just not expecting the world from Julio Jones. For A.J. Brown, though, yeah, the season hasn't been terrific for him, though, but he's now another week back from injury after missing a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully he's playing a lot better. Hopefully he gets going. Hopefully this is a matchup that, again, is going to be tough, but they can find A.J. Brown possibly in the end zone and get him that TD this week. Yo, Headliner Nation, there you go. Your boy's taking care of you again this week, so do me a favor and hit that like button down below. And as always, make sure you subscribe if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners and leave a comment. Who do you have in a matchup this week? Who is somebody that you're expecting to pop off? Maybe somebody that you're worried about? Let me know down in the comments below. I'm going to get out of here. Y'all stay safe. Y'all stay healthy. And I will catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.